Hello, this is Peter Evans, the managing partner of Evans Disability. I'm wanting to make this video because we're getting a lot of questions about the Work History Report Form SSA 3369. And most of Social Security forms, you'll see they refer to a number like SSA 3369. Throughout your entire application process while you're pursuing disability, Social Security is going to be sending you numerous forms to fill out. They're all important. But what I do want to say is that the Work History Report Form, the one we're going to cover today, is probably one of the more important forms. And so we're going to want to give this form your complete attention, and we're going to want to do this correctly. The reason it's important is not only will they be reviewing this work history at the local office, but in 99% of the Social Security disability hearings I've been in, the judge uses this form to go over your work history with you, as well as a vocational expert who's in the disability hearing will be reviewing this form as well. If it's not perfect, you can always make edits to it later. Even at the hearing itself, you can testify later that you made a mistake on the form and you'd like to swear under oath that it was a mistake, and at this point you'd like some clarification. So let's jump into this form. I've done a sample form here. Typically you get this form in the mail, or you can download it online. It's about 8 to 9 pages long depending on what office sends it to you, but there will be a place where they go over all the work you've done in the last 15 years. So here we have the work history report, and on page 1 or page 2 actually, what you'll see is that it'll ask for your name, your social security number, your daytime telephone number. If you don't have a daytime telephone number, then a message. You can give them a message number or tell them you don't have a number, and then go from there. What they're looking for here is just straight job title, the type of business, and the dates you worked. So here I'm giving you sort of the worst case scenario. The job title for number 1 is receptionist. The type of business that I worked in was a law office, and you'll see that the years were from 2020 to 2022. Now, what you really would like to do is give specific dates. So if you have a date like March 1st, 2020, and I worked till March 3rd of 2022, that would be great. If you don't know the specific dates, you can do month, like March of 2020 to March of 2022. And then even worst case scenario, go ahead and just put in the year. The date would be 2020 to 2022. And here you can see we're going to work from 3 jobs. And it's important to remember it's the last 15 years before you became unable to work because of your illness, injuries, or conditions. So that's what they're interested in. Start with the most recent and work your way back 15 years. Let's go on to the first page that asks for detailed information. And here you'll see that it says job title number 1 is receptionist. And I hit dash filing clerk. And that's something I'm going to cover here on why I did that on this page. What they're asking for is rate of pay, and it could be $15 per hour. If it was a salaried position, you can write down $45,000 per year or whatever your salary position was. But let's hypothetically say in this job it was $15 per hour. You can see I wrote 8 hours per day and then 5 days per week. And initially I wrote in 40. And one of the themes on this is that don't worry about being perfect. What we want to do is make progress. So don't just start the whole form over because you accidentally made a mistake. You can just cross it out, and then like I did here on 40, and then put in 5 days per week. You want to be as detailed as you can in describing the job. So here I talked about answering phones, filing, took messages. I used a computer and keyboard to email phone messages. And what triggered, and as you describe your job duties, that may trigger things like, oh, by the way, I did some filing. And because of that, you have to think about, oh, I wasn't just a receptionist. I potentially could also have been called a filing clerk. And in times like this, especially when you're over the age of 50, one of the things that Social Security will really do is think about a combination job where it's both a receptionist and a filing clerk. So you really want to think that through. Was this just a receptionist job, or was this just a sales job, or was this just any fill in the blank type of job? Was I also doing other duties that could be labeled maybe as a stalker, or maybe as a like in this case a filing clerk? So was this a combination job? And I meet lots of folks who maybe were an apartment manager while at the same time they were also the apartment maintenance person. And so that would be considered a combination job. So again, you want to describe the job with as much specifics as you can. And then in the job, they're asking you, did you use machines, tool, or equipment? I try to think of this as kind of more outside the box of not just a computer, but just more like specific machines, tools, or equipment that might be more specialized. And then they talk about using technical knowledge or skills. Did you do any writing, complete reports, or perform duties like this? As a receptionist / filing clerk, I wrote no, I did not use any technical knowledge or skills. When I think about that, I think more of like a mechanic, an attorney, maybe a medical doctor. And did you do any writing, complete reports, or perform duties like this? In this case, I think writing, taking messages, one could argue, yes, that was writing, but I wasn't, for the receptionist job, I don't think of someone as like sitting down, writing full reports or writing full letters. I think of a receptionist job as someone who's taking messages, kind of scribbling them down, or shooting off a quick email. In this as well, so let's go on to the next session. What they're looking for is physically how demanding was the job. Walking, and what they're talking about is hours. And they're typically talking about how much walking did you do in an 8-hour day. So I wrote here for the receptionist job, I was walking 2 hours out of an 8-hour day, and typically standing 2 hours out of an 8-hour day, because typically when you walk and stand can be done at the same time. And so sitting was 6 hours out of an 8-hour day. Climbing, they're thinking about ropes, ladders, things like that. So I did not, typical receptionist does not do that, nor did my hypothetical receptionist job here. And then stooping, bending down and forward at the waist. And because of the filing, I wrote 2 hours. Kneeling means bending legs to rest on knees. So it's sort of like maybe you'll see a football player take a knee in a huddle. Because of the filing, and I would have to put files down on a low cabinet. I put 1 to 2 hours. And again, you can give ranges here, 1 to 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. Crouching, like bending legs and back down and forward, 1 to 2 hours. Crawling, I put 0 hours here. And then handling, grabbing or grasping big objects. Big objects, think of like pots, pans, cardboard boxes. So I put 1 to 2 hours. Reaching, frankly, any type, when you're driving, that would count as reaching, or when you're typing, that would count as reaching. So reaching in front, 1 to 2 hours, and then writing, type, or handling small objects. Small objects would be like pens, pencils, scissors, fork, knife, spoon, things like that would be considered small objects. Even smaller objects would be like a push pen or loose change. And then lifting and carrying, they really want to explain what you lifted, how far you carried it, and how often you did this. So here I wrote, I lifted file boxes and carried them to the filing cabinet. And then check the heaviest weight you lifted. And here's where people kind of get jammed up. So they're not just asking kind of sort of what you did on a typical day, but think about this whole job when you worked as a receptionist, or the job you did do. What was the heaviest weight you ever lifted on that job? Again, the heaviest weight you ever lifted on that job. And here, if I'm lifting large filing boxes and had to carry them, 50 pounds easily. And so that was the heaviest weight. And then check the weight you frequently lifted. And that's the more like 1/3 to 2/3 of the workday. Here I wrote 10 to 20 pounds. I checked the box 10, but as you can see, I put a little line, and you can put a little arrow, 10 to 20, or in the other box, That's at the far end. You could check that and write 10 to 20 pounds. And did you supervise other people in the job? Here, no, I was a receptionist. I didn't supervise anyone, so I put 0. What part of your time was spent supervising? Again, 0. And again, I was not, because I was not a supervisor, I was not in charge of hiring and firing employees, nor was I a lead worker. We're going to cover these questions here on the next job, but generally speaking, the big one that I want to bring to your attention and talk about is really addressing the weight you lifted. Make sure it's the heaviest you lifted. Under Social Security rules and regulations, the kind of the more physically demanding the job is in your past work, it kind of puts you in a better position to win. Obviously you need to tell the truth. You're swearing to this under penalty of perjury that when you fill this out, but a lot of times people are not paying attention to the wording here on the forums, and it says check the heaviest weight lifted. So not on your typical day, but just the heaviest you ever lifted. And that's really important to pay attention. And so you can see here, I talked about job title number 1 being receptionist, and that's correlated to here, job title number 1, receptionist. So let's go down and talk about job title number 2, which is a cashier. And then the cashier job, again, I wrote $20 per hour. And then this one was part-time. So I worked this 4 to 5 hours per day, 3 to 4 days per week. Again, being specific, check customers out at the grocery store, bag groceries. And then I helped clean the grocery store. And then I didn't use any special tools or equipment. There was no special technical knowledge. I didn't write or complete any reports or perform this duty. I went through and talked about kind of the physical demands, walking 1 to 2 hours, standing 4 to 5 hours, sitting 0, climbing 0, stooping. As a cashier, I had to bend down and forward at the waist. Kneeling was less than 1 hour. And so, yeah, every once in a while I'd have to kneel because I'd have to pick something up off the floor, maybe help a customer out, and crouching same, less than 1 hour, crawling 0, and then handling, grabbing, or grasping big objects. So 4 to 5 hours, you're grabbing grocery bags or you're carrying dog food. And then reach would be 4 to 5 hours, which would be basically I'm reaching the entire shift. And then write, type, or handle small objects. So as a cashier at a grocery store, I'm handling small objects all day, from checking people out who are using like tuna fish cans, or cans of food, which is, somewhat of a small object, again, pens, pencils, things of that nature. Here, it talked about lifting groceries from a pack of pencils to a heavy bag of dog food. And I would carry the item 0 to 5 feet, because I would have to check it out, and then I would carry it around the end of the aisle and put it into the cart. And then, at times 50 to 100 pounds. So, you can check 2 boxes. What's the heaviest weight you lifted? So I've seen people do this where they check 50 to 100 pounds and they check 2 boxes. I think they're trying to say they're a range. Maybe they don't know. And I think that's okay to say 50 to 100 pounds. You will be asked, what did you lift that was 100 pounds? And so you're going to be able to need to answer that question for the judge or Social Security. What exactly at the grocery store as a cashier did you lift that was 100 pounds? And just so you know, a lot of these judges have done hundreds, if not thousands, of hearings. And so something like a gallon of milk, they know a gallon of milk weighs approximately 8.5 to 10 pounds. And then here, again, no supervising, but they were a lead worker, which is different than a supervisor or a manager. When I think of a supervisor, you really want to think about the fact that you had the power of scheduling, you had the power of hiring and firing, you had the power of perhaps doing employee reviews. And that's what I think of that's what Social Security thinks of when we talk about supervisor, which is completely different than a lead worker. A lead worker would be I'm the cashier on duty. If there's any questions, then the other cashiers can come to me and I would help answer those. Or I'm helping to make sure that people are taking their scheduled breaks, and then reporting to the manager. But as a lead worker, I'm not allowed to hire and fire someone. I'm not giving raises to my coworker, and those type of things. Let's go on to the next job, and the final job. And so here we talked about construction. I did construction work, $10 an hour, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And here I wrote, I built frames for new homes. I cleaned all the debris from the construction. Did you use machines, tools, or equipment? Yes, because I used an air hammer. No technical knowledge or skills. I didn't have to write or complete any reports. And then here I wrote, as you can see on the walking, was 8 hours, standing was 8 hours, sitting was 0 hours, and then climbing was 4 hours because I'd be on a ladder, I'd have to be on a stool, and then kneeling and crouching, I gave a range 4 to 8 on those. Crawling 1 to 2 hours because there'd be times where I'd have to be on my hands and knees and move around to help pick up nails, or because I was also cleaning, and then handling or grabbing or grasping big objects 4 to 8, and then handling small objects 4 to 8, because again, small objects would be like the nails, big objects would be like the hammer or the nail gun. Lifting and carrying, I had to lift heavy lumber to build frames. I would carry it at least 25% of the day, up to 50 feet. And perhaps I was taking lumber off the truck, bringing it into the build area, and then building it. The heaviest I lifted was 100 pounds. The frequently lifted 50 pounds. And did I supervise people in this job? And here I checked yes. I supervised 2 to 3 people. What part of your time was spent supervising? 10% of the day. And so, did you hire and fire employees? No. Were you a lead worker? Yes. And so, what I want to talk about this is because a lot of people, what they do is when we're so used to talking about our past work, we tend to kind of puff up what we did when we describe it. Meaning, we sort of tell people, especially in the setting of a job interview, look, I was the manager at 7-Eleven, and I was the nighttime manager at AM PM, or your mini grocery store, or I was the supervisor of a construction team. Those are skills, and if you do that with your Social Security case and you actually were not a supervisor, as we discussed earlier, where you actually could hire and fire employees, you were scheduling, maybe doing employee reviews. If you give yourself that title, it actually makes it more difficult to win, because one of the things Social Security will be looking at are what skills do you have that could transfer to something less physically demanding. And so if you're a construction worker and you have all these skills of being able to manage employees, and you can do that, then let's give you a sit-down job where you can be a manager of employees, because that's some pretty good skills there. You know how to interview people, you know how to review people, you know how to schedule your employees, check in on their tasks and their duties. And so be really careful if you check that supervisor job, and then just make sure that if you did do it, you actually were a supervisor versus a lead worker. And that's probably the biggest tip I can give you on filling that section out. What you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and you're going to fill this whole form out with all the jobs. Now, if you can't remember, that's okay. One of the things that Social Security provides is a detailed earnings query, which is provided, and it shows all the places that you paid into Social Security tax and all your employers that did that for you as well. So the judge will be working from that. But generally speaking, to fill this form out, don't worry too much about the detailed earnings query. You just want to do this the best that you can, and using the tips that I gave you here, and then having this form filled out in front of you, and then let's go ahead and get it in. But remember, you're not applying for a job. You're proving that you can't do the work you used to do. And so I would take a different approach in filling this out. This is not a resume. You don't want to puff up your skills. You don't want to over exaggerate what you did. And then generally speaking, the more physically demanding your jobs were in the past, frankly, the easier it is to sort of win, or it puts you in a better position to win. But you got to tell the truth. And, when you're filling out these forms, you always want to tell the truth. And again, I appreciate your letting us represent you. If you have any questions, you can give us a call. Thank you. Bye.